Hey, you guys, wash your hands. This is Mrs. Klein.
Don't touch your face. This is Mrs. Wilbren.
Yeah, seriously, you guys, honestly, wash your hands and don't touch your face.
Okay, and we are here with your Lesson 16 podcast, Life in the West. And just as a reminder, your guiding question is, what were the motives, hardships, and legacies of the groups that moved west in the 1800s?
All right, we've got those vocabulary terms: 49ers, immigrant, legacy, Lewis and Clark expedition, Mormons, Oregon Trail, and Rancho.
Okay, and we're going to start with section 6, which is all about the Mormons. So, the Mormons were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which Joseph Smith had founded in New York in 1830.
Smith's followers lived in close communities, working hard and sharing their goods. Yet wherever they settled, first New York, then Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois, their neighbors persecuted them.
Many people were offended by the Mormons' teachings, especially their acceptance of polygamy, the practice of having more than one wife. Others resented the Mormons' rapidly growing power and wealth. And in 1844, resentment turned to violence when a mob in Illinois killed Joseph Smith. After Smith's death, Brigham Young took over as leader of the Mormons and decided to move his community to Utah, where they might be left alone to follow their faith in peace.
Okay, so Young carefully planned every detail of the trek to Utah, and the pioneers he led west stopped along the way to build shelters and plant crops for those who would follow. Even with all this planning, the journey was still difficult.
Yeah. When he arrived at Great Salt Lake, Young laid out his first settlement, Salt Lake City. By the time he had died in 1877, Utah had 125,000 Mormons living in 500 settlements.
It's a lot of places. It was definitely a magnet to bring Mormons to the West.
Yes.
All right, to survive in this dry country, Mormons had to learn new ways to farm. So they built dams, canals, and irrigation ditches to carry precious water from mountain streams to their farms in the valley. With this water, they made the desert bloom.
Mm-hmm. Now, for their legacy, the Mormons were the first Americans to settle the Great Basin and pioneered the farming methods adopted by later settlers of this dry region.
To the Mormons, however, their greatest legacy was the faith they planted so firmly in the Utah desert. From its center in Salt Lake City, the Mormon Church has grown into a worldwide religion with more than 11 million members.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
It's a lot of people.
Yep. Okay, the next section we're going to talk about the 49ers.
There we go, not the football team.
No, nope. And I love how much that they know about this already from 5th grade.
Yep.
It's so fun to hear about. Okay, by 1849, tens of thousands of gold seekers from around the world had journeyed to the California Gold Rush. About 2/3 of these 49ers, because it was 1849, were Americans. But the motive of fortune also brought settlers from Mexico, South America, Europe, Australia, and even China.
Okay, all right. And I'm going to let you guys know a little bit. It was not easy necessarily to get to California.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So there was just getting to California was pretty hard. So if you were coming from another country, you had to do like over ocean journeys in order to be able to make it. There was no Panama Canal at that time. So if you were going to come from the East Coast to the West Coast, you had to go overland through Panama. And there was malaria and all other kinds of like mosquito-borne diseases and things like that. It was definitely not an easy task even to get there. That was by water.
Yeah.
All right. And then there were clearly some issues once they actually made it to California as well.
Yeah.
Wherever gold was spotted, mining camps with names like Mad Mule Gulch and You Bet popped up overnight.
The streets were lined with drinking saloons and gambling tables. Merchants made fortunes selling eggs for $6 a dozen. That's a lot now.
It is, definitely.
And flour for $400 a barrel.
And with no police to keep order, the camps were pretty rough places.
Digging for gold was hard too, and tedious work. And the miners spent long days digging up mud, dirt, and stones while standing knee-deep in icy streams.
All right, so it was hard to get there, and it was hard while you were there. Yeah. Okay, but they definitely left a legacy behind. By 1852, the gold rush was over. While it lasted, about 250,000 people flooded into California. For California's Indians, the legacy of this invasion was dreadful, with warfare and disease reducing their number from about 150,000 in 1848 to just 30,000 in 1870.
The 49ers also left a prosperous legacy. By 1850, California had enough people to become the first state in the far west. These new Californians helped to transform the Golden State into a diverse land of economic opportunity.
Okay, all right. The last group of people we're going to talk about in this podcast, you guys, are the Chinese. Okay, Gamsan or Gold Mountain was what people in China called California in 1848, and I definitely have heard kids make mention of that.
Mhm.
Okay, all right. To poor and hungry Chinese peasants, Gamsan sounded like paradise.
At first, the Chinese were welcomed. As gold mining became more difficult, however, attitude toward immigrants began to change.
American miners called on the government to drive foreigners out of the gold fields. In 1852, the state legislature passed a law requiring foreign miners to pay a monthly fee just for a license to mine. As the tax collectors arrived in the camps, most of the foreigners left.
Yeah. Now, when the miners' tax failed to drive off the Chinese, Americans tried to force them into leaving. Discouraged Chinese immigrants left the mines to open restaurants, laundries, and stores in California's growing cities.
Okay, all right. And as far as the legacy goes, the Chinese not only helped to build the West, but they also made it a more interesting place to live. Wherever they settled, Chinese immigrants brought with them the arts, taste, scents, and sounds of one of the world's oldest and richest cultures.
Okay. And now, just to review, guys, we talked about the Mormons, the 49ers, and the Chinese. Remember, Mormon pioneers traveled to Utah in search of religious freedom. They built cities and towns and introduced new methods of farming to the dry plains.
All right, the 49ers were gold seekers who came from all over the world, and they rushed into California in 1849. Few actually became rich, but many stayed to help build the new state's economy.
Mm-hmm. And then the Chinese. The gold rush attracted thousands of Chinese immigrants to California. Although they often had to fight prejudice, most of them remained in the United States, working as laborers and starting new businesses and farms.
All right, you guys, I think we nailed it.
Yes, get your Kleenex.